All right, our debate is very serious on a critical matter. In the last few weeks, we've seen so many incidents of bullying in schools. I highlighted the situation in Milnerton High School, where there was footage which went around of a group of 8 pupils attacking a cancer survivor with weapons, horsepipe, belts, hockey stick. It looks terrible, right? When you think about what's happening here, and then you had a more serious student and an alleged bullying incident which took place at St. Stithians College in Johannesburg, where grade 1 student lost their hearing. While the school denies the allegations, it has launched an internal investigation. Close to where I live, in Boksburg High School in the East Rand of Johannesburg, a grade 9 student was stabbed on school grounds after a group of boys allegedly jumped the school fence. The suspects were arrested and the victim is now receiving medical treatment. Yeah, there's so many of these incidents if you go year in, year out, and you'll notice that it seems like there's something systematic on the ground that parents, teachers, the schooling system, the officials are actually struggling with. Bullying is often seen as a backyard problem, but across Africa, from urban centers to rural community, its impact runs much more deeper. It doesn't justify affect it doesn't just affect rather children's education. It shapes their mental health. There's family dynamics that are involved, but also there are questions around community safety. Well, today we're going to be debating this one. Should bullies be treated as criminals or as kids in need of help? We've got 2 guests that are helping us on that one. We've got Ian Ellis, who is a criminal law expert. We also have Paul Wangari, who is a certified counselor and youth mentor based in Kenya. And I'm guessing that Ian is based here in South Africa, where we're broadcasting from. Let me start the conversation with you, Paul. Welcome on the show.
Thank you very much. I'm so honored to be joining you from Kenya, and I look forward to a great discussion this morning.
All right, let's talk a little bit about your side of this one to the question. What is your response to that question? Should bullies be treated as criminals or as kids in need of help?
Well, bullying is a very complex issue. First is because we can look at it from 2 different dimensions. One, we have someone who is bullying or a bully who is going through some issues, and these issues could be low self-esteem. They could be trauma and pain. They could be their yearning for control and power, and others, of course, it could be because of their upbringing. And therefore, when you're talking about bullying, it is very important for us to be able to ask ourselves, where is this coming from? And I want to give it my take, from my own experience, because when I want to talk about this, I want to talk about the trauma and pain that this kid who is bullying or a bully is someone who is screaming within, seeking help, looking for someone or ways to be able to create attention, or for someone to be able to help them. When I talk about that, I want to face with on my own experience. When I was growing up here in Kenya, I remember when I was young, I had this venge. I had this anger that was burning within me, and I could not understand where it was coming from. And I found myself fighting a lot with my classmates, with my schoolmates, and many times that I was taken to the administration, and at times I could be punished or caned for fighting with other kids. But little did I know that this was something, was some pain that was in me, frustration and a lot of bitterness that I was trying to vent out, and I was looking for avenues to be able to vent this out. Where did this come from?
Mm-hmm.
I was born by a single mother, and this single mother died when I was only 9 years old, and therefore she left me in the heart of my grandmother, who was very old at that particular time. Mm-hmm. 2 years later, my grandmother died. I remember when my mother died, no one took me the process of grieving. Mm-hmm. I did not understand what this meant or what it was all about. So now 2 years later, my grandmother also dies. And again, no one prepares me, no one takes me through grieving, because we forget that even children go through grieving. Children also go through loss. and therefore they need someone to
Sure.
help them process the events, you know.
Okay.
And 2 years later, when my grandmother dies, then I find myself, my uncles chase me out of my maternal home, because they thought when I grow up, I would demand for a piece of land, and they thought that I did not deserve a land since I was a son to their sister. And therefore, when they chased me out, I had nowhere to go. A good Samaritan took me to a children's home. Again, in the children's home, there is culture shock. There is kids from different backgrounds. Trying to connect with them, it was a challenge. I felt like I was abandoned. I was kind of dumped in a place where I did not even know anyone. So again, there was crisis within me. 3 years later, because of what was happening inside of me and the trauma, I found myself not fitting in that children's home. And therefore, I was kicked out of the children's home, at some point. And this happened. I ended up being a street kid in Thika town, one of the towns
Sure.
in Kenya.
Okay, I want to bring in our other guest, Paul. So can you please just wrap it up in terms of what's your point indeed? Is it because you're saying that it depends on the circumstances that a bully comes from that might need a different response to their bullying instead of actually treating them as a criminal?
Exactly. So as I wrap up, so all these events that I went through and what I experienced, there was a lot of chaos. There was a lot of confusion within me. And therefore, many of these kids who are bullies, they ask me for help. They need someone to help them. They need a counselor. They need a trusted friend. They need a relationship that can be able to help them process the pain that they are going through. And through that, then they are going to be helped. But when you treat them as criminals, then we are actually demystifying their issue.
All right, let me bring in Ian Ellis, criminal law expert, on our live feed. Remember, we are live. Our guests are joining us on our at Channel Africa 1 YouTube page, so you can see our guests there. Also on our Facebook page, and those live broadcasts happening simultaneously. Ian, what's your take on this one? That question, how should we respond to bullies?
Thank you, Benjamin. I appreciate the sentiments of my co-panelists and your personal experiences, but I think one needs to also take a look that there is a different perspective. And yes, there might be grief and trauma, but at the end of the day, a lot of it comes down to an aspect of discipline that starts off at the home. And it's also going to be severity of what is done and an escalation in violence. Realistically, if one takes a look, we've dealt away with corporal punishment in schools. So there were measures previously. Not saying whether you can agree to it or not agree to it, but at the same time, there were punishments and there were penalties for certain behavior. What has actually happened now is that we've done away with corporal punishment. Home discipline has become almost something of the past, and the children are in essence, especially if they might be deemed as popular or unpopular, they try and prove a point. You want to act like a prison gangster, you're going to end up in prison. It's as simple as that. Is what we've seen in a lot of these issues as of late has not been simply, oh, well, two kids getting into a disagreement or boys challenging one another because of issues of going through puberty and a bit of the old-fashioned type of classroom fight. The whole concept of bullying has now escalated, and it's escalated to the point of criminal activity. If it is a crime, the person needs to be charged. There needs to be accountability for what has in actual fact taken place.
Okay, I need to take a bit of a break. I'll come back to you, because when you say it's a crime and they have to actually face the penalty as a criminal act, we know that the criminal justice system, when it punishes you, it has no mercy on you. A jail sentence is no child's play. should you do that to a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 11, 12, 13-year-old when they feel like, you know what, they've made a mistake or they're too young? Maybe there's a lot of social pressures that are happening in their lives. How do you deal with that? Because someone else could be saying you layering another trauma on top of that young child. We'll talk a little bit about that, Paul, after the break.
In this episode of Channel Africa Conversations, Peter talks to Dr. Thulisile Buddha, an academic, author, and an expert in indigenous knowledge systems. Join us for a compelling discussion on preserving African languages and traditions in the digital era. Dr. Thulisile unpacks the role of educators, explorers, and how technologies like AI can support cultural preservation, and challenges us to rethink how we honor African heritage. You can find the episode on YouTube, SABC Plus, and on our website, channelafrica.co.za. This episode is a must-listen for educators, creators, and change makers across the continent. Channel Africa, the African perspective. We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet, Channel 628.
All right, our question is on our X handle at Channel Africa 1, and we're asking the very same question that we are posing in our debate feature on this Monday edition of the show. Should bullies be treated as criminals or as kids in need of help? You can participate in that one. Go to our X handle at Channel Africa 1 and give us your thoughts there. And we're going to continue the conversation with our guests. Ian Ellis, criminal law expert, saying, you know what, they have to face the consequences. You need justice here. And Paul Wangari, certified counselor and youth mentor, starting the conversation saying this is a cry for help when you see a child bullying. So there are other interventions that are needed outside of calling them a criminal or criminal procedures. Ian, the criminal justice system is no child's play, right? Excuse the pun. But it is actually created for the adult, you know. Someone would say, are you not being too harsh? Where's your empathy, Ian?
Let me put it in this way. Not every crime and every action is going to necessitate a jail sentence. It depends on various factors, severity, age. Also, and I'm speaking from the South African legal perspective, it's also the child's understanding and appreciation of the wrongfulness. You cannot expect a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old to really understand what the concept of wrongfulness is. Automatically deemed as not having any criminal capacity, and then anything after 7, it needs to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. Now, one must take a look that the punishment must fit the crime. And what I'm saying is that it depends. You're always going to have in schools with kids a bit of fighting, type of bullying, that type of thing, of where it's a power struggle, or one is stronger than the other, and we pick on and the weaker kid gets picked on. You were explaining it from your side. Face it, we've all experienced something to that effect. Even me in my school days in the prehistoric times. Also experienced it, but it was different because there was recourse. There were certain codes of conduct. Now, what's happening is the codes are going out the window. There's also, coupled with a lack of discipline and a lack of ability for a school to be allowed to discipline people. Bullying takes different forms, and one must look at the form to justify what the punishment is.
Fair enough. Paul, what's your response to what Ian is saying, that a criminal justice procedure must be followed because punishment is also part of the disciplinary process?
I want to agree, but at the same time, I want to disagree. Why? Because research has been done, and this was done in the US, and they were saying that many of those men, for example, I also know there are ladies, but many of those men who are in prison come from a single parenthood. These are kids who don't have fathers. And I believe this is the same in South Africa, here in Kenya, and many other parts of the world. that those guys who are in prison, many of them are there because of the an identity crisis, because of the upbringing, because of the issues that they went through. And when they are trying to figure out or to find their way out, they find themselves in trouble, and this with the law. And therefore, that's why I'm saying that we cannot criminalize as someone who needs help. It's just like the way someone who want to commit suicide, and then you want to take them to prison because they wanted to take their own life. How does that help this person? So this is someone who is ailing. And that's what I'm saying, that many of these kids, who are bullies, they are going through some psychological needs. They are going through some psychological issues that they need to be assisted. Yes, you can bring justice on one hand, but again, we have these psychosocial support in those legal or prisons or those juvenile homes. Because I have been to a juvenile home. In fact, this week I was training some staff in a children's home, and they were telling me that these kids, some of them are hard-headed. That's the time they are difficult.
Okay, I get what you're saying, Paul. But then what should the punishment be if you're not going to follow a criminal procedure? How do you intervene then?
First is to be able to help this person, and that's where counseling comes in. You need to help them to process whatever it is that they're going through. When you're doing when criminals are dealt with, they are punished either through physical pain or through being put in custody. However, does that help deal with this person in the mind, or do they add to the trauma that they're already going through? So what I'm saying is this: that before you take the criminal aspect of it, you need to help this person understand, or you need to understand where they're coming from. What could be the triggers of their behaviors? And when you go through that, you are able then to understand, is this as a result of a trauma or psychological issue, or is it as a result of just being a bad kid, who just need attention, who just need to bully others?
Ian, you agree with that? The therapy is should be a priority when dealing with a bully?
Not entirely in disagreement, but it depends on when. You know what? If it starts off when the child is a young child and they pick up that there's antisocial behavior coming from the child at, say, a very young age, 4, 5, 6, that type of gap. By the time that child is into their mid-teens, it's way too late. You're not going to go ahead and change them. And the problem is the methods of bullying are also changing drastically, where it's escalating to the point where people have got so many different ways of bullying. It isn't just a mere fighting or that or basic physicality. It's now becoming excessively violent. There's cyber bullying. There's a whole different form of bullying. And just as people who are adults and convicted of that, one must look at the child, because realistically, if they don't, all you could do is look at starting early, and there has been studies about early intervention in early childhood development. But the problem in actual fact comes is when you're dealing with it with a 16-year-old, you're way too late for counseling to go ahead and be all effective in a situation like that. And one also has to take a look that those type of antisocial behavior usually escalates into further antisocial behavior as one becomes older, because there's that feeling of immortality or invincibility. So realistically, it's all good and well and very nice to talk about therapy, but at a certain level, it's too late to worry about therapy, and one needs to look at punitive measures before the victim of that bullying ends up doing something like taking their lives. If we take a look at these recent attacks, those are highly violent attacks where the child was beaten with pipes and weapons, and there was allegations of other type of forms of assaults. You've had people being stabbed, you've had teachers being assaulted in classes with chairs and that type of thing. It's not a paper rocket anymore. Realistically, that is a criminal act. You're not going to stop. You're not going to help that by virtue of saying you're not allowed to stab your teacher. You're not allowed to stab your classmate at 17, 18 years old. That's already a well-known fact. You're not allowed to do that. So in that way, a lot of it comes from this feeling of invincibility, and in that way, you've got to detract from that. Yes, you don't necessarily have to send them to Poolsmoor prison or to Modabi maximum or Kotzibopura maximum security, but at the same time, it needs to go ahead and be punished in the right type of sense, depending upon the nature. And if a person stabs and assaults another child to the point of death, yes, they must be charged accordingly.
All right, Ian, we have to leave it there. Thank you to yourself, Ian Ellis, a criminal law expert, helping us on this one. Thanks as well to Paul Wangari, certified counselor and youth mentor, joining us from Kenya, while Ian was joining us here from South Africa. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Paul. Very strong sentiments made by both of you, and thank you for giving us your different takes on the matter.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Well,